Here we go. Let's do this.
We've got one life, one shot. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Addicted to Betterment, a podcast to inspire us to keep going, to try something new, to dream, to think big, bigger, to overcome. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Hello. It is David here, Addicted to Betterment. And man, do I have a special treat for you today. I tell you what, I was thinking today as I was preparing for this episode, you know how it feels like when you go to the doctor and you know that you're going to the doctor and they're going to tell you something that you're not excited to hear. That's how I felt as I was preparing for this episode. I was like, I know this is going to be some things that's going to cause me to look in the mirror and challenge myself. And quite frankly, I'm excited about it. My good friend, Amy Woodall. Amy, thank you so much for being on Addicted to Betterment. Dang, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's about time. Man, this has been a long time coming. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so I was thinking today, by the way, I want to tell everyone and tell you, you're my second favorite Woodall. I'm very proud of that fact. I'm second to your husband, Jason, who's way more cool than you are. And I also want to say, if my wife heard me say that, because if you want to get my wife, Nikki, fired up and see a side of her that is scary, pick on one of her friends. You want to badmouth Amy Woodall, you're going to get a side of a beast that is going to scare the hell out of you. My wife will call your eyes out. So, Amy, I want to say, you mentioned it's been, I can't believe it's been this long, and I can't either. And I was thinking about, man, I remember the very first time I heard you speak. It was you and Nikki were doing something, talking about who knows what. And I was laying on the couch, half asleep. It's early in the morning. You guys are those early morning people, as am I. And I remember telling Nikki that day, damn, that is one of the most gifted articulators I've ever heard. And I said that early on. And so I was thinking, why has it been so long that I haven't had Amy Woodall on our podcast? If you had told me when we first started this journey, man, you're going to have a ton of people, guests on your show. And Amy Woodall will be way down the list. I would have never believed them. And I'll tell you why that is. It hit me today. I was like, you know why? Because her content regularly challenges me to look in the mirror, get outside of my comfort zone and look at things from a different angle. And who really wants that? I mean, who really enjoys that? So that's why. It's because I know that what you have to say sometimes challenges me to my core. So I'm expecting that today. And I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I regularly hear you talk about ego and how it shows up in our life, and honestly, how it destroys our effectiveness and how we live and serve. And before I ask your questions on that, I want to ask you personally, what is it? What happened? What's some things you would point back to that caused you to get passionate about helping us overcome our ego?
I'm glad to be here. I think everything works in the right timing. And I think we've been kind of geeking out back and forth about just the message I feel passionate about sharing, how relevant it feels, right now. And so on this ego front, I remember it was, I think 2016, maybe 2017, I was driving down the road. I was driving to my office, which at the time was 64 miles away from my house. And I had a lot of time on the road. And I was listening to a book that had been recommended to me by Audible. Audible had said, we think you're going to like this book. And this book was a cover of a boat and a rope tie on the boat. And it was called The Untethered Soul. And I downloaded that book and happened to be listening to it, driving down the road one day in 2017. And it brought up this concept of your inner roommate. Have you ever noticed how when you're not talking, there's a little narrator that's talking, and that little narrator has a lot to say. And listening to this book changed my perception of the world. I remember there was a shift I experienced in an instant driving down the road, where all of a sudden, instead of being the person that was just observing the world and letting the world tell me what it was, I suddenly had this shift and realized, oh my God, my inner world is creating this outer world. So this shift within happened in an instant. And I really was fascinated by that, and fascinated by my own ego and this little voice within that always had something to say. and it was negative a lot, and it was nasty, and it tended to judge me and judge other people. And I began to do some work on that, on, man, are the problems I see problems really true? Like, what if this is mine to own? It then took me down the space of ownership. And because of the work I was doing in the world as a performance coach at the time, I could start to see, look, the world is our mirror. I could see that everywhere. I could see ego all over the place. And so that really launched my passion for my own learning, but also recognizing that many of the problems we face in the world are egoic based problems, not necessarily from our highest, most conscious self.
Man, that's really good, Amy. You can usually tell when someone is very effective at helping others with something. It's something that they recognize in themselves and overcame themselves or worked on themselves. I think of people I know that are help people financially, and it usually comes from a place of they were broke, they filed bankruptcy, and now they have a passion for helping others, and they're usually really good at it. So thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting because, I believe that usually the things that we are most triggered by or whatever, they're internal and not necessarily, from the world outside. It's coming from a place inside. And that's what you talk to a lot. So help me understand, some ways that shows up, because I feel like this is so prevalent in our society today. And what we're seeing, it's like everyone feels positioned to take a side, that the other side is wrong. I'm right. You're wrong. And it's religion, it's politics, it's economics, it's literally in every segment. And man, help us understand how that shows up in our society today.
Yeah. And just like to piggyback, yeah, I am passionate about this work because you know what? Being a human is hard. It is hard. And it's awesome, and it sucks, and it's challenging, and we get stuck, and we get lost, and we get found again, and it's joyful and sorrowful. Like, it's so many things. And we don't have, like, I've never been a human that I remember. I'm sure I was a princess in a past life, because weren't we all kings and queens? But I've never done this human thing. And so I'm so passionate about just trying to recognize, like, how do we do this, connected more deeply to ourselves or to whatever we believe in. And ego has a way of creating, more suffering, more challenges. It's already hard enough being a human. It tends to amplify the story of what we're experiencing. So let me just share, how do we know that ego is present? And then I'll share all the ways that it often gets triggered, or the places it gets triggered. So we know that ego is present when the narrative that we're looking at is one from judgment, because the ego is designed to protect us. It is not all bad. I don't think ego is the enemy. If we are aware of ego, if we're conscious of it, and if we know how to put it in check. I think ego is there because it's meant to help us stay alive. It's meant to show us threats. But ego is a little like, it's kind of old school. Like, the way that it operates is based on threats that existed thousands of years ago and not threats that exist today. And so the way that it gets hooked today is, if you disagree with me and if my nervous system is dysregulated, I'm going to perceive your disagreement as threat. And my body, in an unconscious way, is going to have the same reaction as it would have thousands of years ago if I was truly in danger and about to be eaten alive. And so I might feel my heart palpitate. I might feel my face get hot. I might feel my hands shake. I might feel like I need to fight or flight or freeze or fawn. These are primordial responses that we have, but we can override it with consciousness. So places that they show up, well, if ego feels threatened when it's disagreed with, or it's challenged, or it's pressed upon, or discomfort, when we are uncomfortable or change happens, ego is definitely going to get hooked because it feels like it has to protect us. So let's look at all the ways. Look at all the places in your workplace. Y'all ever try to change software of any sort in your workplace? People will lose their damn minds. Their egos are hijacked. And, that's just one example. The road, driving down the road. My ego gets hijacked when some idiot is driving 10 miles below the speed limit in the fast lane. My ego perceives that as threat because I'm not in control, and my language gets very colorful. Politics. Read the comments anywhere. The comments anywhere online are full of egoic responses because the ego says, in order for me to be right, you have to be wrong. And if you think you're right, but I disagree with you, then I need to jump in and tell you why you're wrong because this is a threat. And it gets mean and it gets nasty and it gets ugly. And we sure as heck are not the best version of ourselves. We cannot be in our highest, best self and operating out of ego at the exact same time.
So what you just said is I felt that as you were saying it, and our society feels it. I mean, I don't care what state you're in. I don't care what religion you're in, what politics you're in, what social media platform you're on, what circle of life you're in. Right now, the air feels heavy. It feels tense. It's saddening. And I feel like what you have to talk about, it speaks to that directly, because I see my friends that are hardcore religious and that are, yay, Jesus, I'm hardcore Republican, Donald Trump is the best, or this, or the other side that says Donald Trump is the worst, I don't believe in God. But both sides, rather than coming together with love, respect, curiosity, it's this need to say, I need to be right. I'll bring it home with this. I remember, I know you have teenage, or not teenage boys anymore, but boys, you raise boys. I remember when my boys were younger, you know, one would come running in and saying, Dad, he punched me. And you go, what happened? And it's, you did this. Yeah, but you did that. And I mean, to try to get back to what really happened is impossible. And so you just shut the door, lock it, and say, fight till you're done, and then come out. But you know what? That's what's happening in our society today. Both sides have to be right. So they're saying, but they, how do we, I mean, what's the answer to that, Amy?
Well, I think we have these false beliefs that acceptance of another equals agreement. And those two things do not have to be the same. I can accept you as a human, being like, hey, guess what? This is your first time on this planet. Chances are you want to be happy, healthy, and free. And you know what? I don't have to agree with how you go about it or your belief system or your actions. I don't have to agree with it, but I can accept that you deserve the same things that I desire. And I think that's where there's a big gap, is that we're so busy slinging mud at each other that we cannot see that, unfortunately, we're mirroring the exact same behavior, but we feel more justified in it because we agree with our side. So the thing is, if I'm like, you know, let's say I align politically with one side, which I have my own belief systems. This is not about being a pacifist. Let me just share that. We're going to go in on religion and politics because it is incredibly divisive right now. And it's also working its way everywhere, into our workplace, into our lives, everywhere. You know, this is not about being a pacifist. This is about owning what we can and being a part of the change that is required to happen one by one. If we inspire one human to be the change that can create a ripple effect instead of waiting for other people to do it. But here's the thing. If I hate your hate, if I am like, I can't believe you don't accept people, you know, you're this, you're that, I have these belief systems. If I am hating your hate, I am bringing the exact same energy to the table, but feeling like mine is better because it comes from a better place, which is total BS. And I get it, because I get roped into it too. Hey, I have an ego. Listen, y'all, I teach this stuff because I need the therapy every day. But I think if we take a step back and say, what's the solution here? Marianne Williamson, this quote has always stuck with me. I share it a lot. I teach this, I teach it in keynotes when people are solving problems. Only that which I'm not giving can be missing from any situation. Only that I'm not giving is missing from any situation. So if what I'm experiencing is that your hate is triggering hate within me, what am I not giving here? Love, acceptance, curiosity, compassion. That's what's not being given. I can't wait for you to bring it. And also, me bringing it, again, does not mean I agree with what you're saying. It's just saying we're not going to solve the problem from the same energy that created it. Me hating your hate doesn't solve the problem of hate. It amplifies it. So I think that radical responsibility and personal reflection of what am I doing to create the change, or am I amplifying the same behavior that I am disgusted by with the opposition?
That's so good. So it's funny, I'm sure I'm the only one that's guilty of this, Amy, but you hear someone talking about ego, whatever it is. My wife and I and Nikki are driving down the road and we're listening to some personal growth thing, and they're talking about loving the other person. And what my natural response is to be thinking, damn girl, are you listening to this? He's talking directly to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, the person sitting in church on Sunday and the pastor's preaching about something, and you're like, you want to tap the person next to you and be like, hey, that's to you. And it's funny. I'm going to read an email that is from you. I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and it says, I see ego everywhere. This is Amy Woodall sending this out in a newsletter. And friends, if you haven't subscribed to Conscious Habit, you better do it today. I see ego everywhere, in politics, in religion, in workplaces, in families, on social media, and especially, this hurts, in the mirror. I don't hate my ego and I don't hate the ego of others, but where there is ego, love is often missing. And it's interesting because when I hear you talk, I'm just going to confess, this is me confessing to Amy. What I think is, the guy, friend of mine on social media, he needs to be hearing this. My guy at work he needs to be hearing this. Oh, you know what? My religious friend who's on his soapbox, he needs to be hearing this. And then, damn it, when I look in the mirror and I actually start judging myself on the things that you're talking about, I'm like, this is why I was holding off having this conversation with you, by the way, on my podcast. But so what I want to dive in together with right now is the person listening to this. How can we look in the mirror with we'll call it data. I don't know any other word to use, but these are real metrics that we can judge ourselves by, to actually look in the mirror and say, oh, I detect ego here where there should be love. And there's not, because it's easy for all of us, I'm guilty, to walk around and think of 30 people to send this to, when I want us as Addicted to Betterment community to actually take your stuff and go, you know what? I'm going to look in the mirror. Let's start right here. How do we do that effectively?
I love that you said this, because we've all been there. We've all been there where we're like, we hear the first 5 minutes of a podcast or a video and we're like immediately sending it to other people. And I've been guilty of this. I have to check myself a lot, because I have to say, before I go out and share this with the world and tell them what they need to do, am I living this for myself? What's the lesson here? So I want to just really double down on that. If you feel called to share it, it's also because you're called to learn it or alchemize it more deeply. And it doesn't mean you're not doing a good job or you're not conscious already, but it's calling to you for a reason. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being the ripple effect. And also integrate, own it, utilize it. It's calling to you. So, and like I said, number one person over here, I have to remind myself of that. So, I mean, as far as metrics, here's what I would say. When we're operating from consciousness, or to be able to leverage our conscious mind, what is required? Number one is awareness. Can you check in with yourself when you are angry, frustrated, feeling like you want to be a keyboard warrior, feeling like you want to share that divisive, post that you saw without fact checking? That's the other thing, is like, I just need to share. The bias in our mind, I say ad nauseum, the eye see what the brain believes. If I have an allegiance to one side and I read 3 lines of let's say a news report, and I agree with it, I'm going to immediately reshare it. I'm not going to fact check. I'm going to see it as the gospel. If I disagree, I'm going to see that, differently. So I think the awareness is like checking in with yourself before we act. What's going on? What am I thinking? What am I feeling in my body? That's step number 1. Step number 2, this is actually the framework that we teach. Like, this is what I practice every day, and this is what we teach. But step number 2 then is ownership. Ownership comes in the form of curiosity, of like, oh, why did that bother me so bad? Why do I feel the need to share this? What good am I hoping will come out of this? Whenever something triggers us, that existed prior to you reading whatever you read. That existed prior to the conversation you had. That existed prior to the action that you just witnessed. So that trigger has been yours. You have been carrying around. Someone else just gave you the gift of exposing it. And so being able to reflect in of like, what's going on? What am I believing is true about me right now? Really being able to understand what is the ego story wrapped around this. Another thing that we want to do, we need to be aware. We need to dip our not even dip our toe, like put a whole ass leg into ownership, and then regulate your nervous system, because when our nervous system is hijacked, our thinking is also hijacked, right? So now you got to go into, and these can happen in any order, but these are the first three things, right? So now you've got to go into breathing slowly, connect with your breath, remind your body that you're safe, because again, your nervous system thinks it's unsafe. Remind it that it's safe. These are the aspects we've got to practice over and over again. When I'm practicing this, the next thing that I do is I look at, how do I subtract ego from here? So where there is judgment, where there is righteousness, where there is a wrong and right and good and bad, and that is ego. Ego has to make things, very granular. We have to have the opposites for ego to understand and feel safe. So then looking at how to subtract the ego story, that's the next piece. If my ego weren't talking, by the way, give your ego a name. Make it separate from you. It's not you. It is not you. It's a part of you, but it's not the whole you. So separating the ego story. The last piece that I do is like, what would love do in this moment? What would love do allows ego to sit in the passenger seat, because again, we need ego. It's not all bad. If it's in the driver's seat, it is like a toddler, with the keys to your car. It's going to be messy. So what would love do puts ego in the passenger seat, and it puts your highest best self in the driver's seat. And then act from that point. It's not about just think good thoughts, pray for the world. It's like, no, now what's the loving action? Maybe instead of reposting that shitty thing you were going to post that only creates more divisiveness, maybe you text somebody you love something amazing about themselves. And what you did was just shifted that energy. You just transmuted the energy of hate and frustration to one of love and gratitude. And that is powerful. One person at a time.
Damn. That's literally the best thing I've ever heard you say. And I've heard you say a lot of good stuff, but I remember as a kid reading a book about a pastor who decided one day as he got up to speak to his congregation, and he challenged them about the way they were operating. And he said, man, what if we looked at it? What would Jesus do? And he challenged them. And then from that started this massive movement that people were walking around wearing bracelets, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And when you said that, I'm like, if we approached every situation in our life, what would love do? What would love do? You're about to send that message. You're about to respond to your spouse, to your coworker, to your friend or your enemy, or someone who sees, looks, acts differently than you, and you're feeling a certain way. And it, let's face it, it's ego, but in that moment, you're not recognizing it's ego. But if you could just pause long enough to ask yourself the question, what would love do?
I love that. And I think it's because the teachings of Jesus, religious or not, I mean, I do think religion can be politics in the sky. If ego is involved, religion can be beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But when ego is involved in religion, it says this way is the one and only right way. And if you're not doing this way, then you are bad and you are wrong. And it's like, oh, interesting that every religion thinks that. Okay. And that, what happened to people before religion existed? Like what? Okay. But believe what you want. If it makes you feel good and safe, believe it. The minute you think everyone else has to also, or they're bad, that is when we have interjected ego into religion. And people are flocking away from religion because it hooks their own ego. Ego hooks ego. And Jesus is a beautiful teacher. Actually, back to Marianne Williamson, she wrote a book called The Mystic Jesus, which just shares the lessons of love and takes out some of the unfortunate politics that are added into, religion at times. And just it's stripped away to the lessons. And ultimately, Jesus and love, that is one and the same. You could interchange those words for sure, because that is what he taught. Love each other. Love each other.
But you're so right. I want to dive into this for a second. You sparked something. I have no idea, Amy, where you were planning on taking this, but you hit something that we've got to talk about right now. So we'll start with religion. So I grew up in a very conservative religious home, and I love Jesus, And I have friends that are in all different facets, but it's interesting because every single religion, I have friends that are hardcore Catholic. I have friends that are hardcore this, hard Pentecostal Baptist, Muslim, you name it. And they're very close friends. They're very good people, good-hearted people. They genuinely are living their best life. And they believe that, oh, my way, I have the truth. And if you believe different than me, that you're wrong. And it's like, that's where ego comes in. And as you said that, I thought, if every single one of those just started with, what would love do? How would love face this? Not how would my religion, how would what my teachings, what any, break it all down. So, sift it all the way down to the base. What would love do? And then I think politics. Politics, if you're hardcore left, hardcore right, I imagine if you and I sat down at the table at the bar with a beer or around the fire pit with a cocktail and started talking politics, I imagine there's a ton of things we would completely see different. I would hope so. Anyway, and yet at the end of the day, if we decided I have to prove that I'm right and that you're wrong, and here's why. But if I approach that conversation of how would love handle this, man, that would change our whole entire conversation, Amy.
I think it's so good for us to go again back to that perspective of like loving someone is more acceptance. It's not agreement. And like our ego has a hard time wrapping itself around that, because here's what I believe. I think the gift is that I am a Libra, y'all. So I tend to see things like from both sides pretty clearly. And I'm also a middle child. So fairness kind of runs in my, how can I see what's true on either side? And, I think in these, when we're dealing with this disagreement or this frustration, if I believe that you have to think and believe and act exactly like me, then what I'm really doing is wishing away my own personal freedoms. Because if I believe that my personal preference should be the greater good for all, our personal freedoms become at risk. But if I'm like, hey, I have a way of living that feels right and good and how I want to show up in the world. And so long as it does not impede on the rights for others to do the same, I should have the right and ability to do this. And so should you. And so should you. Even if I don't agree with you, you should have the right to live your life in a way that does not impede on the lives of other people. But what's happening is we are impeding on the rights of other people, putting our own rights of freedom at risk, because when we risk one, we risk all. I don't know that we're seeing that, or maybe I'm just oversimplifying it, that, you know what, I will fall on the sword if that's the case. But I see that as being the greater risk that we're all experiencing.
What would love do? You got me on that. So let's think about this. Let's look at the areas of life, how ego versus love. And let's paint a picture of what the ripple effect would be in our society if one person at a time, like David, if I get off this call today and I know that I'll get off and I'll be moved and I'll be challenged. I usually am when I listen to your stuff. And I go look in the mirror and I think of the things I'm facing today. Like I have multiple meetings on my calendar after this that you know what? My ego wants to act and talk a certain way. And I'm already thinking this is me and you on our podcast. I'm thinking ahead to the conversations I have today. And I'm thinking, oh, dang, how would love handle that conversation? And if I'm going to be honest and vulnerable in this conversation, it's different than how I probably was planning on handling it. And then I think of that's work. Paint a picture for me of the different aspects of our life, how ego shows up and how love, if we approached it with what would love do, how would that show up?
Well, because we've talked about the two dirty things, politics and religion, let's start there, and then we can move our way into other aspects of life. In politics, what would love do? Love would bring curiosity. Hey, help me understand. What does that mean to you? Why is that important to you? Where did that thought process come from? How does that enhance your life? How do you think that might harm the lives of other people? The tone and our, intention behind it matters, because I could come to you and create defensiveness and say, well, why do you think that way? we'll tell, so having conversation, by the way, it's really hard to sense genuine curiosity purely through written text. People, and if they believe you disagree with them, are going to read it from the ego's lens and see it as accusatory. So have a genuine conversation with someone who thinks differently than you without trying to prove that your belief system is right. That's not the goal. The goal is, how do I just really understand? They see it that way for a reason. How do I create understanding? Your disagreement is not going to change their mind. It's going to have to be their own. So I think having genuine, curious conversations. In religion, tell me more about that. But that seems really special to you. Help me understand. And I think if you are a religious person, I love that for you. If it makes you feel safe and you're like, this is a beautiful thing and I love it and I just want everybody else to know about it, I think that's great. But what would love do in just compassion and curiosity? And ego says, well, I don't agree with you, but that is ego. That's not love. Love doesn't need to tell somebody whether they think they're right or wrong, So don't make it a loving ego, that's something to be. But again, back to compassion, curiosity, help me understand. Where did this come from? What does that mean to you? How does that help your life? When it comes to the workplace, who's somebody that drives you crazy, that you have a lot of judgment over? That person is revealing something within yourself that you maybe have been avoided. That has been my sense. When I find people who really frustrate me, it is because there's a part of me that I have not fully accepted that has been revealed in them. And so seek them out, learn their life story. I think that it's difficult to dislike people whose stories we understand and know, where we take the time, because we humanize them. We humanize them. We don't create intentions on their behalf. So, it can follow us anywhere. And I was just sharing this with Nikki yesterday. Actually, we happened to be riding in the car together yesterday. And I was saying, I met a woman at a retreat in upstate New York, and we spent a little time together when I was in Charlotte. She's actually from Charlotte. And we had a conversation and just shared things with each other. And the next day she responded to me with words I had said, but she used the phrase, I heard myself say. And then she filled in the blank with words I had said. But I think what I understood what she was doing was seeing herself so that the message could really resonate with her. And I've been trying to practice that, especially with people who have driven me crazy. I was on a flight a few weeks ago, and there was a woman, sitting 2 rows ahead of me that was way too loud in my ego's opinion for 7 a.m. in the morning. I mean, I could hear every ounce of her conversation with my noise canceling headphones in, and she's, giggling. And then I remembered my friend Zoe, and I said, man, I'm awfully loud this morning. Maybe I'm really excited about something. Trying to see ourselves in other people, I think, allows us to just, again, see them as humans, have some compassion and understanding. I think that's really helpful when love is there. And I think even deeper with ourselves, when we are unhappy and unsettled within ourselves, we are more unhappy and unsettled with the world around us. And so what is your relationship with you? Do you know your own goodness, your own wholeness? Do you have a really solid relationship within yourself? Because if not, that's going to become the responsibility of the world around you if you don't make it the responsibility of yourself. So what would love do when you look in the mirror? It wouldn't point out the wrinkles or the dimples or the things you dislike. It wouldn't point out how maybe you don't have enough, you need more money in your bank account. I need this. Love would not do that. How would love talk and treat and look at you and your life, and then let that ripple out in those other areas?
So I read a quote yesterday from the Dalai Lama. I'm sure you've heard it before, but in order to make others happy or to contribute to the happiness of others, show compassion. In order for yourself to be happy, show compassion. And I thought, put love in there, love, compassion, very similar things. But man, if you want to live a fulfilling life, show love. If you want to be angry and be frustrated and constantly feel like the world is against you, then let ego rule. But how your life changes. I truly believe, Amy, that this simple question could change my life, your life, our spouse's life, and their ripple effect would be unbelievable if we simply started everything with what would love do?
Yeah. I love that. 5 minutes in the morning. I think, what if we held ourselves responsible for 5 minutes in the morning spent with love? Just 5 minutes. That's it.
So I'm going to do something tomorrow that I've never done in my life. Anybody on Addicted Rabbit wants to join me in this? When I look in the mirror and I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm actually going to look in the mirror and say, what would love say to me? What would love say to me? Because it's easy to look at yourself and think all the things you need to do better, all the things you got to, the list is endless. And I assume that I'm not the only one like this. But imagine if I looked in the mirror, started there in the morning as I'm getting ready, looked in the mirror and thought, what would love say to me? And then my spouse, who's God's loudest gift in my life, there are days I can't even believe that I get to be married to this woman. And then there are other days I think I can't believe I get to be married, or the other way. But if I approached every situation, what would love do here? My kids. I have teenage boys that I feel like I would give my life for. And you have teenage boys too. But if I approached the conversation, my son's coming over for dinner tonight, and who knows what, boys, I love them, but it's a roller coaster. How would love approach this? And then the challenges at work, and then my political friends, what would love do here? I'm going to start something, and let's start a movement. Let's start a movement of people starting with the question, what would love do?
I love this. I'm in. And I just, reminder to self. Here's what I'm going to continue to remind myself of. Before I can demand better of the world, I need to be better for the world. And that requires sitting in love and, holding myself responsible to shifting to it. And I just, again, as we're kind of wrapping, a reminder that love can hold people accountable. Love can have tough conversations. Love isn't just complacent and non-acting and pacifist, as I mentioned in the beginning. That love actually can make change and move things forward. Hate bullies, hate demands, hate controls, hate, but love can get things done and move mountains with the masses, feeling like they're ready to row in the same direction instead of having to push back. We cannot overemphasize the power of shifting to that thinking.
So love is not, I love something you said, and I want to hit this head on. Love is not passive. Love is not a passive, weak thing. Love is a force. Love is the strongest force on the planet. You hear stories of people who have picked up cars. I heard a speaker one time say something that, if you were sitting in a meeting and someone called you and said, Amy, your son was in an accident. He's at the hospital on life support. And you need love would propel you to jump out of your chair. You wouldn't care what the people in the meeting thought. You wouldn't care who. You would be like, whatever I have to do. You wouldn't be worried about the speed limit, about stopping at the stop signs. You would do safely whatever I have to do to get to my son, because love would be driving you to do things and act with urgency in a way you've never acted before. Love is the strongest force on the planet versus hate or ego, as we'll call it. Ego divides, love unites. Ego pushes down, love lifts up. Ego hurts, love heals. Love is actually an active, it is a powerful force, not a passive, I'm just going to sit here and love. Love is action.
Amen. I love that love helps us focus on what matters most. And hate gets us sidetracked to the little things. It's it just takes us off track of what truly matters. We get our eyes off sight of what really matters. And so I love this, as you mentioned, love propels. I think that that's huge. And we haven't talked about this yet, but here's another, kind of soapbox we could go off on. Some of the listeners, maybe you've heard of the Schumann resonance scale. If not, highly encourage you to look this up. It's this interesting way that researchers are able to measure the electromagnetic field of the earth. And what we know scientifically, because I love some woo. Okay. I joke I put the woo in Woodall. Which is hilarious if you met my husband, because he's not woo at all. So I brought that to the table. We know that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can change forms. We know that to be true. Okay. And then we also have this Schumann resonance that can measure the electromagnetic field of the earth. As humans everything is made of energy. It is made of light and sound waves and, atoms. I mean, we put our hands underneath a microscope and we are vibrating atoms. Everything is energetic. Before major events have happened on the planet, like for example, the days leading up to 9/11, the Schumann resonance scale was off the charts. Which what researchers are beginning to understand is there is a consciousness. Again, we may not be aware of it, but there is a collective consciousness that we are all connected to that can be measured, and that we happen to know when things are going to happen that are going to shake things up. And so I think this is a radical responsibility, back to this, what would love do? When anger and hate meets me, what I have tried to practice within myself is I can either contribute to keeping this energy going, and then who knows? I mean, if all things are energy, a spark of thought in your mind is energy. A spark of an emotion, those are energetic connections that happen, right? Am I contributing to more hateful thinking and actions in the world unknowingly? Because all energy is connected. Now, I know that sounds a little more on the woo side, but when you add the science to it, I think we can wrap our minds around that a little bit. And when I shift that into love, could I help produce a miracle? Could I help produce an act of kindness from a stranger? When we suddenly feel inspired to do something nice for someone, that energy comes from somewhere. And for some of us, we can attach it to our spiritual beliefs. For some of us, it could be like maybe just the energy of love met you in that moment, but it had to start from somewhere. And so even that of like, not just the actions we're creating, but also the energy we're continuing to put out into the world could radically be shifted if one by one we asked ourselves that question, what would love do?
I think of my religious friends. I'm going to speak to you directly right now. If you believe in Jesus, Jesus showed the most radical love on the planet. And if you believe the gospel, that most of the gospel that is preached on our planet or in our United States of America as we know it, what we believe is that Jesus loves unconditionally. And so my challenge to you, if that is your belief, and you're standing in a position of looking at someone thinking, I need to tell them, I need to do this. Just think of all the things that Jesus knows about you. And he's pecking you on the shoulder saying, hey, I love you unconditionally. I'm showing you love. If that's what you believe, then show up and think of how can I love someone that doesn't think like me, that I want to prove wrong, that doesn't look like me, act like me, talk like me, or believe like me. How can I show them that kind of love, unconditional love? And then I'm going to talk to my friends that's on the other side that, if we just took this planet by force with love, and you said something that gave me goosebumps, and I don't get goosebumps a whole lot, but when you said, if we could take things like that and shift it to love, think of the most challenging circumstance in your life right now, Amy, and I will do the same. The thing that is the most challenging, I don't care if it's a business, I don't care if it's a personal relationship, if it's an ex, if it's a friend, if whatever it is, how would love change that situation? And you talk about miracles, the miracles we would see in the ripple effect of that. It wouldn't matter what happens in Washington, D.C., because love would rule. The shift in what would happen if we all started with what would love do. And I tell you what, I am moved. I am moved to start with that. And I believe we are on at a time, Amy, right now, and I'm going to challenge all of our friends, and I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap it up, but I'm going to challenge all of our friends to start a movement. Start a movement. What would love do? How can you go wrong? I don't care what side of the fence you're on, you can't disagree with. Let's start with love.
Love that. And here's a small little thing you might, because we talked about starting with 5 minutes of love in the morning, right? We talked about when you recognize the hate or frustration coming to you, not to amplify it, because we're only perpetuating the same, outcome of hate. And so how can we shift that to love? Taking some of those pieces of responsibility, just being conscious of that. But something we could also incorporate is pray for the people's happiness. Send them love. Send love to the people you disagree with most. You have to feel safe to do so, right? I want you to honestly step into your own body and be good in your own discernment, okay? But if you feel safe to, pray for the happiness and send love to the people you disagree with or who have angered you or frustrate you. Again, bring what's missing. And if we're operating from that lens of compassion, like you mentioned, David, we can then begin to see, because we rise above, we can see it from a different lens. We can't see it when the energy is the same. We are literally on the same playing field. We do not have the same view. When we rise above, we can see it with more compassion. That's like, oh, they don't have love for themselves, so they don't have it to give for the world. It must be so sad in there. How scary, how dark, how frustrating that might be. And we can begin to bring compassion again, not agreement, but compassion, acceptance of humanity, shifting darkness to light with that loving intention.
Amy, thank you. What would love do? Let's go.
So you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.